Okay, folks, it is show time. Welcome tonight. Thanks for joining us. This is segment 2 of our wild turkey hunting webinars: firearms, ammo, clothing, footwear, miscellaneous equipment, calls, and calling. So thanks for being here tonight. Tonight we have Hannah Plumpton again, our upland game bird biologist, covering biology Q&A. John Henry Harrelson, our District 4 wildlife biologist, covering hunting and Q&A. Eric Gleason, Master Officer, Law Enforcement Division, Laws and Regs Q&A, and obviously me, Hunter Engagement Coordinator, as MC, hunting and Q&A, and I do tend to narrate the questions with my loud, annoying voice. So the long story short with the webinar logistic overview, it is 1 hour. It is recorded in the cloud in Zoom and distributed in less than or equal to 2 weeks and maybe longer. That is processed by somebody in our, in our division, but I have no control over delivery. So hopefully you're going to see the live event, but you will receive the recording if you're on the roster. Q&A length is 30 minutes, questions in writing, topic specific and addressed to Q&A in writing only. And we get them at the end. Chat hand raising is not monitored. And please allow us to cover material before writing questions. A lot of times people will start writing questions and it's something we're going to cover. Whether it be that website, which is our current website there, and I believe that one's also going to be changing to .gov, but soon, but not yet. And obviously you can use .org for a while. At least that's what I'm hearing, because our emails are as well. And/or the Regs Digest. That is where you go for everything you need. And as you're going to likely hear me say, or you did last night, let your fingers do the walking first. There's so many questions I get that can easily be looked up, whether on the website or the digest. And I like a copy of the digest, that way, I'm an older guy. I'm used to handling paper and everything's in there. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm involved in, I'm sorry.
Hey, Dee, we don't, I can't see your PowerPoint presentation in presentation mode. All I have is outside of slideshow. So.
Oh, really?
Yes.
All right, let me try something. Okay, so right there, let me try it again. Hope it didn't have anything to do with that glitch.
No, I still can I don't still see it in slideshow.
You can't see the slideshow.
Oh, now we got it.
So you didn't at first, though?
No, I didn't at first. So go back to your second slide so people could see that for you.
You mean this one?
Yeah.
Okay,
excellent.
so you did see the title, but not, you did see the title, but not this one.
Correct, because you had it, but it just didn't pull into the presentation mode.
Have no idea what happened. Thank you so much. Yeah, always jump in, scream at me. Thank you. So again, I think I already explained it. Hopefully they heard it. 1 hour webinar recorded, distributed in 2 weeks, 30-minute Q&A. All our panelists, which you will hear from eventually tonight, questions in writing, topic specific and addressed to Q&A. So in writing only. Chat hand raising not monitored. Please allow us to cover the material before writing questions. And obviously, whether it be the website or the digest, that's where you'll find everything you need to know. And thanks again for joining us tonight. And Hannah, if you do not see the second slide, yell at me.
You're good.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm involved in the hunting webinars and the hunting workshops. Used to be in-person seminars. COVID came and killed that. Went to the webinars and also at the workshops at the same time. But now we learn to live with COVID. This is all the programming. You can see it on the right for this year. I suggest you check all of it out if you're interested in hunting and haven't attended anything before. We have a lot of workshops. We have workshop minis and even some things that go into December. If you've already registered for this, you know how to register, so you don't need to worry about that, how to register. One of the greatest limiting factors to this program is volunteer support and venues to expand around the state. So if you're even remotely interested in being involved with the program, whether as an instructor, an assistant instructor, a logistics assistant, or providing a venue, please reach out to Learn to Hunt there at the bottom, ncswildlife.org. And it can be simply LTH. That's my alias. So we want to hear from you. Another thing to tell you about is R4. And last night I didn't spell it out. In my realm as a hunter engagement coordinator, R3 is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. Well, there's an R4, and that's retirement. So it's not about accolades. It's about saying to you that if I've seen you in the past, I want to see you again before I move on to the woods. And if I've never seen you, I'd like to meet you. So there's a lot of programming there. Please look ahead. Lots of workshops, minis, and I hope to see you down the trail. John Henry is up next, and this is where we get into, obviously, the firearms, ammo, clothing, footwear, miscellaneous equipment. And then after he is finished with his, I'll jump into mine. So pay attention. You're learning from experienced hunters, and hopefully this will help you. John Henry, take it away.
Hey, good evening, guys. Let's make sure this thing works. D, I think you may have just took control again there.
Yeah, I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna fix it. Okay, how about that? Try that again. And I don't know, we had this black screen earlier. I don't know what happened. But it shut everything down. We finally got it up. So hopefully we'll be good here tonight. Hopefully there's no glitches. Go ahead.
All right. So it looks like I got it back working. So thanks everybody for being on tonight. My name's John Henry Harrelson. I'm the District 4 wildlife biologist. And there you go. You're looking at pictures of me enjoying turkeys and enjoying turkey research. I've been lucky enough to participate in the 3-year turkey research project that just finished up that we're going to have webinars about, or actually in-person seminars about soon. So I encourage you to look up where those are. There's going to be one in the Coast Piedmont Mountains, and Hannah will be leading those or talking at those. But tonight we'll just be talking about what you should be taking when you go hunting. And these are things I consider before I go hunting. And, and I think about these things and because it's going to determine what I take. So it's like whether I'm going on public land or private land. So if I'm going on public land, have I done my research? Do I have to have a permit? Am I going to be walking really far? If I'm on private land, most of the time, the spots I have to hunt are small. So I'm not going on an all-day hunt more than likely. I already have stuff set up. It's a little different type of gear I would take. Additionally, what type of terrain I'll be hunting, whether I'm going to be wearing my knee boots because I'm going to be hunting around a swamp because it's wet, or whether I need to be wearing my really good hiking boots because I'm going to be in the mountains and I'm going to be walking a long ways, that matters. And also what kind of pants or what kind of top you're going to be wearing because you're going to be exerting more energy, thinking about your maintaining, dry clothes as you're going throughout your hunt. Is this a new place you've been or have you been there before? That determines a lot for me because if I've been there before, a lot of times I know where I'm already going to set up at and I have an idea of how I'm going to go about hunting. So maybe I get there a little later or, maybe I know exactly what time to get there. If I haven't been there before, probably I'm going to get there probably real early. Make sure I'm not messing anything up. Who's coming with me? So if I'm bringing my kids with me, well, that's a whole long list of gear. That pretty much means I'm not shooting. I got to have a tripod. I got to be thinking about snacks. Am I bringing a buddy with me who's not really experienced? I got to make sure he has his gun. Am I bringing some stuff for him as well? Or am I going with my mentor? And then I get to kind of not be as responsible. And then, how long are you going to hunt? So is it going to be a 30-minute hunt right before work? Well, then you probably don't need to take water with you and have a backpack or, you can go very, very minimalistic versus if I'm going to go all day, well, you definitely want to have water. You want to have snacks. You want to be prepared for things to come up. And so that gets into just the different types of guns and ammo that you can take with you. This is just some of the firearms that I've killed turkeys with, from a 12 gauge at the bottom to a 20 gauge over and under. That's a 410 870. and all kinds of ammo, lead and TSS. And now I'm going to tell you, I really jumped on the 410 train because I have kids, and also it's fun. And that's the gun I hunt with, and there was supposed to be some ammo pop up there. I use TSS. I will tell you, whatever firearm you choose to use, you should make sure you sight it in and that you know where it's hitting with the load. So like on those shells, it's like $7-8 a round. So I shoot, high brass number 7s to get it on paper and know where I'm hitting at 30 yards, and then I shoot a turkey load. So I have a good idea of where it is before I'm shooting that first TSS load, because they ain't giving it to you for free. That's for sure. But you always want to make sure you know where your gun's hitting. Those little red dot scopes, like that one I have there, it's a fast fire. You can get a lot cheaper ones than that. They've changed the way I turkey hunt. They've really helped my kids, because you don't have to have your face right down on the barrel every time. And, you put that red dot on there, and it's hitting where that dot is. This is things I take with me in addition to just the gun. What else are you taking with you? I carry decoys and I carry a vest. As far as decoys go, I used to have some really cheap $10-20 decoys. They work. I invested in some Avian-X decoys. There's DSD. I mean, there's all kinds of decoys now, and they're getting incredibly realistic. They do help in some situations, especially when you're hunting fields or you're hunting in open places where the birds can see. They're looking for that calling. If you're calling, they're looking for a turkey to be up there. And decoys can help them come in. It doesn't work every time, so it's up to you whether you want to carry them or not, and how much you want to spend on them or not. It's not a requirement to go hunting. And that vest you see is like 15 years old now, and I probably paid $40 from it from an academy. So you don't have to have something incredibly nice. Additionally, the other decoys you see people use all the time are the reaping decoys or fanning decoys like this. They can be very effective in certain situations. They can also be very dangerous. And so you should use caution and use common sense when you are using that kind of decoy. And if you are choosing to be behind it and crawl like a scoot and shoot, that's not something you do on public land. That's not something you do where you can see from the road. If you've been on your own private land, I would encourage you to use this with caution if you choose to use this. But I want to make you aware it's out there, and it is an effective technique for killing turkeys, especially turkeys in fields. So what else are things that I take with me? So I always have a face mask or multiple face masks with me. I have at least 2 sets of gloves, because I find I take my gloves off or take my gloves on. It's just better to have spares. I'm gonna be honest with you. I usually have, if you can see the mouse, some kind of toilet paper or napkins or some kind of paper towel facilities with me. I carry clippers with me to cut out a little spot against a tree, or to cut vegetation that I make a blind with to make me more hidden. Being hid is imperative. The birds have incredible eyesight, and they are coming to look for another bird, and they are looking and are very aware of their surroundings and are very paranoid. So having cover for me is important, especially when I'm going with my kids. I always wear a hat. I carry a thermocell because I hunt on the coast and mosquitoes are out from the get-go. I would encourage you to spray your clothes with permethrin. Even if you carry a thermocell, you can buy it pre-mixed and soak your clothes 1 or 2 times, and then you'll be good for the rest of the season. I carry binoculars. I now carry them in a chest harness. That's kind of the fad, and it's a fad for a reason. It's a very good spot to carry your binoculars. It's just not shown here. I typically carry at least 3 shells with me. It depends on what firearm I'm carrying. You see those yellow shells, so this was a 20 gauge. I always have some kind of snack and water, and then that antler there with the paracord is a turkey tote. And then those everything else there is a crow call or my turkey calls, which we'll go over. As far as what I wear, I'm gonna be honest. Now I am going even more to like a tan bottom or a brown bottom and a leafy suit top. You see, I got some matching bottom laying or green leaf there. As far as boots wear, I typically wear a leather boot or a muck boot, depending on if it's wet or not. And I just, I want to be comfortable. I'm finding that's more important. And quality is, as I'm getting older, quality is more important to me. So I, wanting to invest in quality and more quality gear. Like I said, leafy suit top. The one I have is at North Mountain Gear that you see right there. If you watch YouTube and you watch Turkey Hunting, the Ben Hody Project, this is the same tops he wears. Dave Owens, and I'm a big fan. They're expensive, but it's a quality top to wear throughout the turkey season. Another little hot tip I'll give you is about socks. I have transitioned to all black socks or brown socks. I don't have white socks anymore just because it's easier not to grab white socks out of the dresser drawer. But you don't want to be sitting there and your pants leg right up and the turkey walks up and sees you from 45 yards away when you move your leg and it sees that white sock. And I know you're thinking, man, that can't happen. I've seen it happen with my daddy. That's what made me change my mind about wearing white socks turkey hunting. So that's a little hot tip for you there. As far as blinds and chairs go, if you were hunting public land, this may not, the blinds may not be as effective because a lot of times you're having to carry them in or you're competing against other people and blinds weigh. They're not light in most instances. But if you have private land and can set these up beforehand, these are absolutely great for kids. My daughter, who's 8, we hunt out of a blind almost exclusively at this point when she is the shooter. When she's not the shooter, of course, she can sit on the ground with me outside of a blind. But when she is a shooter, we use a tripod at the moment, and this thing hides all kinds of movement. Very, very helpful, but also you got to have some pre-work. You got to have some stools in there. You got to have some forethought, make sure it's in a good position. Turkeys get real used to blinds pretty quickly. So you can pop it up the night before, you can pop it up the morning of if they're not hearing you, and they will walk up there. And you see there also different chairs and different additional blind coverings that you can use, like little temporary blinds that you can set up. I do take one of those bottom ones, like you see there, just like some leafy material with me, especially when I take my 10-year-old because she likes to move a little bit still. So just minimizing that and adding a little more cover. The calls I typically tote 3 or 4 mouth calls. I would encourage anybody who's getting into turkey hunting to learn how to use a mouth call. It takes away the movement of your hands. If you're looking for which ones to use, the Dixie Deer Classics this weekend, and it's essentially the Turkey Call Classic for part of it. So walk in there and talk to all those people with all those turkey calls, spend a little money, and you can have about anything you want. I typically tote a pot call with me as well. I now tote a couple of strikers. My wing bone call, it just depends on what I'm feeling. I'm not the best with that thing. Lots of people are. It takes practice. And then additionally a crow call. I don't tote an owl hooter with me because I can owl hoot with my voice. And those are shot gobbles. That's what we use that for. But turkey calls, that's one of those things you can never have too many of. So like I said, go out and spend some money and buy a couple, get a couple variety packs and watch some YouTube videos or watch our videos that we're going to show here soon, and we can help you learn how to call. Additional common calls, you have some trumpet calls, some push peg calls there, some box calls, things that are that you'll find, and Deet's going to show you a whole bunch of these coming up from his personal collection, a little more in depth than what I'm showing you here. And then the final thing I'll talk about here is shot gobbles. And if you don't know what a shot gobble is, it's just, you know, a turkey gets so fired up during the breeding season that he is responding to anything that sounds like a turkey gobble. And it can be a coyote howler, an owl hooter. Like I said, folks use crow calls. That's what I carry if you're in the mountains. An elk bugle tube. I mean, it's such a thing that the Meat Eater made a T-shirt about it and talks about all the things that turkeys will gobble to. Slamming the car door, you know, canning the geese honking, all kinds of stuff. So that's a good technique to get birds to gobble, where you're not letting them know that you're a turkey or imitating a turkey. And that stuff we'll get into when we start talking about techniques. So, all right, Dee, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John Henry. I will say, whether it be webinars or the workshops, it's always good to have multiple perspectives. You know, you get into situations where learning different techniques from one another, you end up learning more. And that's why we try to do this every time. So now I'm going to give you some of my stuff, including a little bit extra because I can never provide enough. And I will say, warning, I am an unsupervised retail therapist. So when you are that, you like to spend money. It's very easy to do. And so I like when John Henry mentioned, yes, you can never have enough calls. I can't agree more. Thank you for that, John Henry. It was kind of a segue. So these are just a few of the turkey guns. I finally counted my turkey guns, quite a few. Too many, some would say, but no such thing, while keeping in mind that every time you purchase a firearm, you contribute to conservation funding. So it's far from me to deny conservation funding. So on the top, we got a 10 gauge, we got a 12 gauge underneath that. Both of those are semis. We got a 20 gauge semi. That's a 410 pump, and obviously a plain Mossberg 20 gauge. The point I show is that 10 gauges are pretty much obsolete. You can't even buy them anymore, yet they were kind of king in the late 80s, 90s. 10 gauge is very common. 20 gauges are getting to be the choice now, especially since they, and you'll see a slide in a moment, can make essentially 10s and 12s obsolete. 410s, as John Henry showed you, are coming up, especially with the premium ammo, still somewhat limited range. But my final point with this is, you do not need special camo guns or sights. And as you noticed, you know, some of them have sights on the top. Some of them have at least one has a red dot. You can take any inexpensive shotgun, and with the right shell and choke, you've got a turkey gun. When it comes to chokes, that one on the far left is a flush mount that typically comes in every gun now that has screw and chokes. Back in the day, and I'm referring to around the time I started 1972 hunting, there were no such thing as screw and choke. So now guns are very versatile. Well, then too, especially with turkey hunting and even with waterfowl, these aftermarket chokes come out that have improved patterns. One of the big advantages right off, besides the porting and everything else, is the fact that they extend the choking. And when it comes to the lead loads, the extended tapering of the choke, instead of getting that full short choke where it's a quick slam, slamming that shot together, that's what ends up putting flat spots on lead shot. And especially that isn't copper plated, and even it gets somewhat copper plated or nickel plating. By extending that choke, that in of itself improves pattern because it's a gradual choke. Do you need these? Absolutely not. If your gun shoots good with the flush mount one, you're good to go. As you can see, there's a 10 gauge 3.5, a 12 gauge 3.5, a 20 gauge 3-inch, and a 410 3-inch. With, as I mentioned, the 20 gauge and especially the TSS premium ammo that you don't really need, and TSS is referred as tungsten super shot. You don't need it, but it has basically made that larger 12 and larger 10 that packs so much more shot obsolete. So it's killing at the ranges the original 12 and 10 gauge did, which the comfortable range was always 40 yards. And I will not shoot a turkey beyond 40 yards because it's kind of a luck whether you can get enough pellets in there, even though you can with this premium ammo, but I don't recommend it. I'm comfortable with shooting a gun roughly 30 35 yards away, and I won them at 25. And with the 410s too, premium ammo, as John Henry pointed out. But what you want to know right off is choose the largest gauge you can comfortably carry and shoot. That 10 gauge you saw earlier is 12 pounds. Now, if you work out, you know, young or in good shape, yeah, it's not a problem. But they also, with more shot and the laws of physics, comes more punch into that shoulder. So is it too heavy and does it recoil too much? Some people are recoil sensitive. And so that's why that 20 is a little bit better. It still has recoil with a turkey load, and the 410 is even much milder. But as a general rule, them lighter gauges are still a shorter range affair than those bigger guns, even though the TSS has changed that. What you're looking here is all a bunch of different copper-plated ammo, and I'm sure you can see my cursor, or at least I like to think you can. This is, some of it's semi-vintage. They changed the look of the box, but these are all copper-plated for the most part, with the exception of these in the center, out to here too. The Magnum blend has, you know, usually a little bit of bismuth coating or something like that. You know, it's proprietary. Third degree has some different shot, including lead, and actually was initially heavyweight. Now it's tungsten. This was the big thing that come out after a while from lead, and it's much more dense and heavier than lead and harder. It doesn't get those flat spots. Very popular for a while. But then this came on the scene. As John Henry said, it's expensive. I've seen it from a low of $5 for a turkey round, a single round, to as high as almost $20 for a 3.5-inch 12. So if you're not a state worker, you probably can afford it, you know, because we state workers aren't rich. Or if you're a retail therapist, you can afford it. Do you need this? No. Does it extend the range? Does it make the patterns more dense? Yes. But I even still use, even though I use some TSS, I still use the lead loads. A lot of opportunity. Guns, loads, and patterning. I beat this up every time, whether it be at these webinars or the workshops. So why do it? I got a bird gun. I've been hunting grouse. I've been hunting rabbits. You know, it's good to go. I can kill a turkey. I saw it shoots a pattern. With those smaller birds, you know, yeah, it only takes 1 or 2, sometimes 3 shots. But when it comes to turkey, and of course, I'll just say this right up front, as I kind of indicated, absolutely no need to pattern gun. It already shoots a pattern of shot. What you'll find is that gun may not shoot to center. And center, say, on this turkey target is typically where we say pretty meets ugly, pretty feathers, ugly caruncles, even though I think they're beautiful. That's those red things that hang down there. You saw that in the biology last night. The dead center pattern, as that expands, will get this entire spine and brain area. Flesh shots don't count. So for example, here's a situation where, say, that turkey gun, yeah, they had a pattern shot, but in 2 instances, you can see this. Now, I don't know how far this was. I kind of pulled it from, you know, from the World Wide Web. That is off center. And although there's a couple shots here in this spine here, there's next to nothing in that bird. If you take a shotgun and a turkey load, or sometimes even a field load, that would be recommended, the field load by like a low brass, that can kill a turkey at close range, but it won't if the shot's off center. This may kill a rabbit or a squirrel at a distance, but here's what you want for the turkey. And that's obviously a very close range shot, or relatively close, with specialized choke. And you can see how tight that is. And obviously, as it goes out the further range, it's going to expand more. But that's what you need to find out. Does that gun shoot center? And believe me, many guns do not. And then you've got to do something to make that happen. So a desirable pattern has a lot of pellets at the point of aim. Again, you're pointing for rabbit shooting or quail or clay targets, but you want it on center. And also something like this with a lot of holes in it with just a few shots, that is an undesirable, especially for shooting turkey at turkey ranges. So here's where I actually took a shotgun, and as I say there, know your shotgun's maximum effective range, and you should never shoot beyond it. That was 20 yards, turkey load, first time in that gun. I didn't change the sights, but you could see, as compared to shooting center here, we're shooting low. So I was able to adjust a little bit and put it in that area. But then double that distance and look what happens. opened up much more, although there is a pellet in the spine, which would have taken that turkey out. And that pattern does change, you know, as you pull a trigger each time, they might be in a different location. But I would almost want to say that that's not really a 40-yard gun, and I would try it multiple times. I'd say it's probably more like 30 or a 35-yard gun. Well, for the heck of it, I shot at 60 yards. Well, as you can see, there's one spot that looks like it just on the outside of it. That's a turkey that gets away. And you know, all these flush shots, they don't kill a turkey. They end up sticking in the meat. That's the ones you have to pick out of the breast when you clean it. So know that maximum effective range. And as I always say, before you pull that trigger, put yourself in that turkey's place. And as I also allude to, respect and empathy for wildlife, not simply targets for our amusement. So yeah, put yourself in that animal's place. Know that maximum effective range of your gun and don't exceed it. And it may be 20 yards with a smaller gauge, 25, maybe 35, maybe 40, but you want to know that. These people that say, yeah, I shot one at 60 yards, or I've heard people say, yeah, I shot one at 90. Yeah, they got lucky with one pellet, because even TSS at 90 yards is losing, has lost the majority of its energy. Keep that in mind, folks. So obviously, shotgun only, well, no, shotgun shot, always at the car uncle's there. And if he's in a strut, let him pull out, you know, make a little noise like a hen yelp or give a like that, get him to stretch that neck, because believe me, I like eating wild turkeys and I don't like to eat pellets. So that's where you're shooting. Bow, it's right at the front of that wing butt. That's where the vitals are, and you're going to see a picture. That's a bow only shot into the vitals. That's also a bow only shot into the vitals. And I say here, bow only, but you're essentially at the pretty meets ugly. So it's kind of a shotgun shot too, but you're going to eat pellets. Try to avoid it. They're not very tasty, and I always work to get them out because they're not good for the dental work either. So there you're looking at the vitals on a turkey, both left and right. You can see where it is. Unlike a deer where a chest is pretty obvious, there's where you would want to place your arrow. Keep in mind that turkeys, unlike deer, do not leave good blood trails. So when you shot and it ended up getting away, did you just roll it, blast some feathers off? Did he fly, run off? Again, another reason to aim very carefully. Don't rush the shot, and yeah, don't shoot out of your maximum effective range. Pay attention to the direction of travel, especially have to go after them. And in most cases, and you're probably going to see it again, bow shot turkeys into vitals typically don't anchor like a shotgun shot. So you want to keep in mind how far they go. Look for scuffed up leaves, broken twigs, because remember, again, blood trails, no, not good or not at all. I had one roll down a mountain about 200 yards, almost into the river. And what is I was looking for little broken, fresh green twigs led me to that bird, not blood. Peek into blowdowns or undercut creek banks. They will, if they're conscious enough, they will try to hide. Stop occasionally and look around, because it could have got off the track from where it maybe went straight and went right or left. If you can't find it, walk circling and/or paralleling transects. I've done this to recover deer a few times that were mortally wounded, but left hardly any blood, and that helps find the bird. Don't give up until convinced the bird escaped unscathed. And the longer you hunt, the more likely you are to lose a bird. And believe me, it's the worst thing ever. I've quit half-a-day hunt spending forever looking for a bird, and we're so disgusted about it, because that's not our intent, to go out there and lose game. But it can happen to you, and you just learn from it. So to that end, assess what went wrong and don't do it again. Was it too far? Did you pull a shot? Remember what I said about flinching? You close your eyes before you pull a trigger, or you yank that trigger. You're supposed to slowly squeeze that trigger. Didn't pattern the gun. Inadequate ammo. That can happen. Turkey was moving. Was there a bug in your eye? More or less a joke, but you got something in your eye, you're not looking right. Turkey ducked. If you're aiming sometimes at that head rather than that spot where pretty meets ugly, just when you pull that trigger, he could easily take a duck. And I've seen people on hunts shoot at the ground or shoot at the air. They got that excited. Archery equipment brief for you. Just know that we do regulate bows in the state, and 40-pound pull minimum for the long bow and the recurve. For the compound, it is a 35-pound, and I think I said long bow and recurve in the last one, and 100-pound pull for the minimum of the crossbow. Broadheads for big game to be legal, obviously need the 7/8 fixed or the mechanical open, but it has to start out being 7/8, well, or 7/8 minimum open. And obviously, if you use this one, which hunters do, it's called the guillotine, that some people will shoot at the head and neck with the bow, or even with a regular broadhead, but that'll decapitate, and that turkey's guaranteed to stay where you shot it. As I noted earlier, rarely are turkeys anchored with an arrow unless you do cut off. They tend to run off, not go far, maybe go down quick, but it's not quite like the full blast to the head or taking the head and neck out. So getting to some equipment, I travel very light in turkey. I don't tend to use a lot of synthetics like I do for deer hunting because I'm sitting all day. I'm a run and gunner. I have a hard time waiting 15 minutes for a turkey to come in. I become very impatient where I can sit in a tree stand 13 hours and think nothing of it. So typically light polycottons. If it's relatively warm, just a long sleeve tee, although that's a blue color, which is not any recommended color. You're going to see that again. It's underneath this pair of socks. I like to wear a base layer, and usually wool and or acrylic if it's warmer. A hiker's great for flat ground, but I like ankle support in the mountains, and I'm a ridge runner. So it's very easy. It's easier to twist an angle in this. It's a little harder to do it in this. Obviously, swampy areas, rubber muck boot, regular rubber boot. As it warms up, and mostly where I started is cold in the highlands, I don't usually need to wear these. But if you're in Piedmont or Eastern North Carolina, snake boots are good. I love snakes. I just don't want to get bit by them. Maybe if it's a little cooler in the mountains, I'll have an overcoat, also a hoodie, a hat rather than just my ball cap. I will always have an orange hat when I'm moving or carrying a bird out. It'll be in my pocket. I don't wear it when I'm hunting. Turkeys see color. Of course, even the camo or the underwear camo. And in extreme weather conditions like I'll encounter in the highlands, it's been snowing already, I will sometimes wear a base layer under that light stuff too, a top and a bottom. Like a boonie hat as it warms up, sun in your eyes, a little bit more cover than the regular cap. I like a half mask, or it's referred to as a 3/4 mask that I can easily pull up and put down to cover the lower part of my face. And sometimes I use the over the bag in the head once the mosquitoes get up, although I do use permethrin on clothing. Very important to keep the ticks and chiggers off. I will carry a little spray maybe to put on my ears, but if it gets nasty, I'll do this fine mesh bag over my head. You can see right through it. You don't want to be moving with a turkey. Camo handkerchief, never carry these. Those are all colors on the gobbler. Good way to get accidentally shot, even though that shouldn't happen. You don't want those colors. Or as John Henry said, that can spook a turkey. I'll typically start out with a relatively light glove, something like this. I love these wool finger cuts, or sometimes full fingers if it's cold. And then the flap over camo that I'll put little hand warmers in. Again, if I'm in the highlands, I'll typically get snow or temperatures 30, 40 degrees. Of course, my camo belt. I like a turkey vest, but a backpack or a fanny pack works nice if that's what you prefer. The turkey vest provides me with everything. I have lots of these, but I'll typically start out with this one. It's an original mossy oak made in America, and I'll always start the season with it. Always carry a turkey bag to carry the turkey out. It's got carry straps on it. Sometimes carry a rain jacket if I know it's gonna get some spritzes, but I'm usually sweated from moving anyway, so I don't. These bug tamer suits are great too in the Piedmont or East, because far better because you have that mesh. They even have their own head net, and there are cheap versions of that, but bug tamer is the actual name. You don't want to be moving when you're turkey hunting. You don't want to be getting bit up either. I'll carry these cheaper decoys. I'm not one that buys high-end decoys, and you're going to see some decoys coming up as well, just to share in my hunting progression. These work perfectly fine, and I'll touch on that. This is what's referred to as a wing. Primos made it. You can make your own, but for doing things like fly down cackles, or just rubbing it against a tree or scraping in the leaves with it like turkeys would do. It provides one of those non-vocal call natural sounds, and I like a fan. I have this other polyvinyl fan that I use that I carry didn't carry other decoys. But as a general rule, if it's a dominant bird, this will bring him in like a moth to a flame. If he's a subdominant, referred to as a satellite, it can also scare him off. And decoys, I only carry them 25% of my hunts, if not 20%, because I don't have time to set up. I strike a bird close and yeah, just don't have the time. And but this will scare away a subdominant bird. So yeah, progression. I used these when I started out. Now, did they look like decoys? Not. This was a little bit better. I was using them a while ago. Paint's starting to wear off. Then I went to the cheap Walmart variety. And of course, these are some my brother gave me that are a little bit higher end, but definitely not what John Henry's are. To my point, when a turkey's coming in and he's looking, in my own personal opinion, and it's always good to have different perspectives, they're looking for a silhouette. By the time that, and although the realistic look far better, I will not argue that with the iridescence and everything. These foldable ones, though, are very collapsible. And the reality is once that turkey gets close enough, and I will place decoys as we, so I believe, I want to say we stated that, no, we stated that either last night or that's coming up. Yeah, that's coming up. Anyway, we place decoys within half the distance or less of our maximum range of the shotgun. So when they come in and they realize, ruh-roh, that's fake, boom, and it's all over anyway. Yes, calls. There is a variety of calls, and I have lots of them. This is just a slight collection from standard size box call like this or this one to shorter boxes to bow paddles. To actually ones that are waterproof. Do you need all of them? No. May you want all of them? Yeah. But the difference is you may have a turkey that likes the sweet sound of this one day, and the next day he I don't even like that. And then he likes this one. He likes this one or likes this one. Turkeys are just like people. They have their own personalities, and they will actually sound different too from time to time. When it comes to slates, there's slate, traditional slate, there's glass, there's copper, there's aluminum, there's ceramic, there's crystal. Each one of those also give a certain tone. Although this one tends to be a go-to favorite, you'd be surprised how after a while, sometimes they won't respond to it, and something like this will light them up. Locator calls, whether it be a hawk or a pileated woodpecker or a crow or an owl, that's a call that is used, and we will mention that in the calling video. That is calls to use to get the attention of a turkey, not to call it in. You don't want to use turkey calls when you're getting ready to set up or just trying to find out where birds are, especially if you're not hunting them. You want to be set up and ready to use a turkey call, where locators are just to locate them. So putting all my stuff together, I got my vest, I got my clothes, I got a pair of high top boots, ankle support, usually non-insulated, even in turkey season. My undies, there's a different pair of a liner. That's a wool sock. We got the cap, we got the orange cap, we got my camo belt, we got my face mask, we got my camo hanky, we got a light pair of gloves, usually I'll start out with. Another bag over the head. I carry a little bit of spray. I don't, as a general rule, carry binoculars. I'm mostly hunting woods. I'm a fan of a handheld GPS. Love them. Even though there's Onyx, there's Avenza, and all the other phone apps. I have them, but I like a GPS. Headlamp, sometimes a green one when I'm running a ridge, a green light that I think is a lot less alerting to turkeys. And there are people that use red ones. Phone case, my camo watch, my toiletries, and always brown napkins, not white. Remember, don't be using white, not safe, always food, always some snack bars. My license is in there, my journal, been doing that for over 30 years now. Water bottle, you can never carry enough of it, and I'll fill that in the highlands. You don't want to fill it in the Piedmont or the coast. Crow call, owl call. I usually won't carry that later in the season because I'm one that likes to let the earth come alive and not do the hooting in the morning. Holds diaphragms, my box call in that case, a boat paddle, a gobble call. You'll hear more about that later. My slate call, or that's a glass. And then my decoys, my decoy bag, that fan, the wing, and the bag. That's usually my full accessory. When I'm in the Red Roof Inn and the Red Roof Chevy Inn, and last night you guys saw it, I wake up to this and I'll gobble it down in about 1.5 minutes and I'm not strangled so far. Sometimes I'll have a granola bar with it. I like these meal replacement shakes, the cheap ones, banana, apple. I will carry this variety of snacks. It changes. I'm getting into the more healthy varieties, and I've even changed from the Hershey's dark chocolate to the Dove dark chocolates because they have them really neat little messages that I really enjoy. Back in the day, I used to wear no inserts in boots. Now, as I'm aging at the big 6'4" right now, headed into 6'5", the arch support helps out big time. So I highly recommend you wear arch support unless you already do. So this is our calls and calling video coming up after the slide, and it's a tag team because John Henry and I do it. We had a lot of fun with it, and we do have one more video too tomorrow night that I think you'll enjoy. And as I like to say, and I heard this by somebody else, so I stole it. If a wild turkey were to enter a calling contest, it wouldn't even place. Well, what do you even mean? A wild turkey, it wouldn't even place in a calling contest. And no, that's because I've heard turkeys that I thought to myself, oh, geez, there's a hunter over there. And it turned out to be a turkey. What we think as humans is the best sound, the crispest sound, just like with music, no doubt. We get all caught up in how good you have to be to call. And that's fiction. Is it good to be a good caller? Is it good to practice your calling? Absolutely. But sometimes turkeys don't even sound good. So don't worry about it. Just practice, and you're going to hear us mention about a turkey call in the video. So yeah, practice makes perfect. So let's fire this up. Hey everyone, I'm Deke James, Hunter Engagement Coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission.
Hey guys, I'm John Henry Harrelson. I'm a district biologist with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. And today we're talking turkeys. So in front of us we have an array of turkey calls that most hunters would carry with them in the turkey woods. And we're going to go over the basic differences between some of these calls right now. So you have two types of calls, air and friction calls. Air uses, of course, your mouth or air pushing over the call to make a noise. Common calls are like mouth calls, your crow calls, your locator calls, gobbler tubes, even wing bones or trumpet calls. Friction calls use friction, whether you're pushing down on something, using a boat paddle handle.
These box calls are turkey calls. These pot calls, as they're referred to, are turkey calls. So is there one called a push pin? With these pots, again, you're running the striker, but with the air calls, we're going to focus here on locators. For example, a turkey gobble itself is considered a locator, but we'll talk about cautions relative to using that. Most of the locators are calls like crow, pileated woodpecker, owl, and coyote, hawk calls, and things like that. Locator calls are used basically for getting the bird to answer, or when moving on a bird, a gobbler, and turkey calls are for actually calling in that bird.
I agree, Dee. You definitely don't want to use turkey calls or overuse turkey calls in an attempt to locate birds. I use my voice for an owl call. You can practice at home using your voice, or you can buy a owl hoot like Deet has here.
And as an example for a barred owl, which is common in the South, and I am not an expert turkey caller or locator call user, and neither do you need to be. Some can use a natural voice, John Henry will, but I give you an example of the barred owl with this call. That can get a bird, especially in the morning, to make a sound, to elicit a sound with that call, and then you figure out where he is and you can set up. Or it could be the crow call, which is typically used later in the day, not in the morning. Just a regular blast or a more aggressive sound. And sometimes that turkey, he's used to hearing that regular blast, but the aggressive can get him to talk.
I will just add that you want to limit your use of turkey calls when you're locating birds. I always go by the adage, I'd like to know where they are before they know where I'm at. And locator calls help you figure that out. All right, so now we're going to go over a couple different common calls that you would make in the woods using a multitude of calls that you see in front of us. So the first call would be the yelp, and this is probably the most common call that you hear in the woods. It's one of the most common calls that turkeys make, and it's a call you hear people use to get birds to come close. And a yelp is just, I think it's a simple note that you usually string a couple together, and I'm going to be using the diaphragm call because that's usually what I'm most comfortable with, and it would sound something like this. Dee, what about you? What do you like to use?
Well, I like to use them all, and we will be talking about diaphragm use because obviously it's one of the harder calls to get used to. So I'll try it here with a slate call, and typically my go-to happens to be this glass. I've been carrying it around forever, but as you can see, there's a multitude of surfaces. And obviously, if you're a retail therapist and like to buy things, then you'll probably have more turkey calls. You don't need a lot of turkey calls, but we'll talk about a variety of sounds, meaning that someday a turkey may like the sound of this, but then other days that turkey may not. So a variety of calls is a good thing, but you don't have to. So for example, yelp. And basically there are several ways to hold a pot. I've seen people hold it like the crab claw. And there's also the Eastern North Carolina stilts that they put on the house in the flood zones. You're basically putting that palm against that call. Don't touch the calling surface. Make sure the surface is scratched up with a piece of emery cloth as well as the striker, and little half circles. That is a pod call yelp.
Another common call, which is very simple to use, is a push button call. And this is actually a call I carry for my kids. This is the call they can use, and it's just simply pushing the plunger here, and inside you're creating friction. So another friction call. So very simple, but again, you're moving your hand just like you're moving your hand on the pot call, and movement is an enemy when you're turkey hunting. So keep that in mind. These calls that you're moving your hands on, there are limitations of using those calls when birds get in close. So up next, what do you think? The cluck. So a cluck is mixed in, another common call that turkey hunters often use and turkeys often make. And you oftentimes, at least I do, I mix it in with my yelps when I start. So usually my first call is a cluck. So it sounds something, at least for me, like this. So I will throw 2 or 3 clucks in and then add in a couple yelps. And that's a really common call sequence that you often see or often hear in the woods from turkeys calling back and forth to each other.
I can try the box here, and I will say that I think maybe we missed the box yelp. With a box, you're basically holding the side. If it has the extra edge on the bottom, keep your call hands away from the center of the call, because that is the tone box. You're just taking this paddle that you keep well chalked, and I will say, don't use school chalk or street chalk. It needs to be turkey chalk. Those other chalks have oil, so that's very important. Most calls come with a little bit of turkey call chalk. So the yelp, and you don't take the call off the call, you don't take the paddle off the calling surface of the box. Simple yelp. With a cluck, as we were talking about, and you can either make it louder if the bird's a little further away, but we don't want to confuse that with the putt. We'll talk about the putt later. How to very easily make it with that.
And you can tell we're not winning any calling contests.
No.
But if you ever spend any time in the woods, you will hear turkeys make a wide variety of calls. And even some of the most, I'll tell you, the worst calling I've ever heard has actually been from live hens. So don't think that just because you don't get it right away that you're not going to be able to call in a turkey. I would encourage you to spend some time in your vehicle. That's what I do, away from my wife and kids, to be able to make these calls, because it does get a little annoying when you're trying to learn how to do this.
Yes.
The last common call we'll cover is the purr. And a purr is a content call that birds often make when they're in close proximity to each other, when they're feeding, or just when they're meandering through the woods. And for me, it's actually easier to do it on a pot call. I think it's one of the easier calls to do on the pot call, and you're just pushing down your peg and pulling across, which it would sound something like this. And the same thing with the push button yelper, you're just slowly. And if you mix that in with a little leaf scratching and a little other content calls, it can really bring birds in and close those final few yards you need when a bird's out of sight or just hanging up right out of distance.
Yeah, there's one we can add with that too, because there's a difference between that soft, subtle purr, as John Henry pointed it out, that can bring them in the last minute. But there's also that aggressive purr that gobblers will do when they're fighting. And it can be a situation where if you have a bird, he's hung up, not coming in, or even has hens with them, that sometimes happen, and we'll be talking about that a lot in our webinar, is an aggressive purr rather than that soft, subtle. And sometimes you got to find a sweet spot on your call. Rather than that, it's like this. Very, very loud, shrill. That is a fighting purr, and oftentimes that can anger that adult gobbler, that dominant gobbler, into coming, and you're not even using a hen call. We also had a tree yelp. Let's start explaining what that is. What's the tree yelp, and why would we use it?
A tree yelp is one of the first calls you hear in the morning. Usually it's the first call a hen lets out, and she's just letting other hens know in her family group or in her group she's with that, hey, we made it through the night, and usually alerts the gobbler's first gobble in the morning. And it sounds something like a normal yelp, but just really sleepy and really quiet. So I like to make it something like this. Just very quiet, very subdued. I don't want to be loud and aggressive because I've been asleep all night and I'm imitating a real hen, just waking up on the roost, and I want to sound like her. And I'll tell you, another tactic we hadn't talked about is using some of these calls in combination, using a mouth call while you're using a pot call or while you're using a slate call to give the sound that there are multiple turkeys in the woods or you're using multiple turkeys around you.
Yep, as an example. And if you're sounding like two hens are better than one to that gobbler. You get them fired up. With that tree call, again, something we'll be talking about. I keep bringing up the webinar, but a lot of this will be covered in strategies. When you talk to that bird with that tree call, if that bird answers you immediately or cuts you off, that bird's ready. And in most cases, you can just put the calls down and let that bird find you. Would you agree, John Henry?
I agree, but I'll tell you, it's awful hard to put those calls down sometimes.
It is hard to put them down because, and I call too much too loud. But sometimes we can actually make that bird hang up and not come in, because what is the natural way of the wild turkey, Henry?
The natural way is for a gobbler to strut in one spot and for the hens to all come to him.
That's right.
And so we're trying to change that and make the hens stationary and the gobbler come to us.
Yes.
So it's a cat and mouse game.
Yes. Overcalling can definitely affect that. Here's another call, the gobble. And we didn't mention the putt, so we'll need to mention that too. The gobble of the wild turkey will challenge dominance, just like the fighting purr or even a gobbler call, and I want to mention that one too. Almost forgot about it. Or no, that's an advanced tactic. We'll talk about that. Anyway, the gobble call. This is something you need to use very sparingly on public land, not often suggested, because if you're hunting with other hunters or even on private land, soon as a turkey hunter hears a gobble, that person wants to get as close as possible without scaring that bird and then set up and call it. So when you shake a gobble call like this, you're both challenging that bird, but you could attract other hunters. So use it sparingly. But again, the idea is that bird's hung up, maybe he's with his hens, hen calls aren't working. Sometimes this can bring them in, but again, use it with caution. Okay, folks, now we're going to talk about the mouth diaphragm. The mouth diaphragm is obviously one of the harder to use, but what's great about it is it's hands-free, a variety of sounds and tones and cadence, easier to carry, much lighter, and one of the things that's most important is proper fit. For example, this one is really a standard size, and you can see it's kind of worn. I've had it for quite a while, but they come in all different sizes and colors. And one of the things we want to note right off the bat is your palate may be different than someone else's. Some people have a narrow palate up there in the roof of the mouth, some is wider. As a general rule, I like a standard call, which is like this, but some of these more narrow calls also work better. They'll have a variety of reeds, which is the latex in the middle. They'll have different cuts, and they'll make different sounds. But the initial way to get a sound out of it, before we make any calls, is the first thing you want to do with the call. It'll typically have a tab or a point on the bottom of the call. And that's an aluminum frame. It's like a latex tape on the outside, almost like a hospital tape. And then narrow reeds that are crimped in between an aluminum frame. And it typically comes when you buy the call. The instructions are in there. You want the tab down. When you put it in your mouth, it goes up in the roof of your mouth, and your tongue goes up against it underneath, like that. And typically your tongue is just right out in front of that reed. What you're doing is you're not blowing air, even though it's an air call, you're huffing air from your diaphragm, huffing it out. And by making them sounds, it causes those reeds to vibrate. Now what you'll discover is that early in the season, when you get started again, it'll tickle your tongue and you'll go like that. And you just scrape your tongue with your teeth, and that's kind of my routine. But that goes away after you start calling. But the first thing you want to do is make a high note and then a low note. You make a high note by a lot of tongue pressure. You make a low note by less tongue pressure. And then what you do is put them together. So you find the proper place, not way back in your throat, right in the front, not far behind your teeth. Put it in there. And when you first put it in, walk around with it, get used to it. Because the first thing that will happen in your mouth is you'll start to salivate. That's the natural food start to prepare it for digestion. And if you start making calls right away, you'll probably start spitting and everything else. Well, if you're in the woods, that's not really a good thing. If you're competition calling, that's even worse. But the idea is get used to it in your mouth. You'll stop salivating after a while. Then once you do, put it up in there. High note. Then the low note, a little bit less tongue pressure. And then you put them all together. And typically, when you see someone turkey calling, they'll be doing this, they'll be doing this, they'll be doing that. Not only does it hide up the silly face you make with the call, but it also can let the turkey know that, hey, if he's not so interested, I'm going away. You can muffle the sound. He starts circling you over this way. Throw the call this way. Starts circling you over that way. Throw the call that way. That way you're controlling, essentially, the sound. So for me, with this call, put it in there. Now you'll notice that is what is typically my go-to. But I will say that the thicker the reeds, the harder it is to force air. So if you're a new hunter, start out with a very thin reed, 2-reed call or a 3-reed call, and then just try a variety. See what works best.
I would encourage you to buy a variety pack. Get a 3 or 4 pack off the internet from a reputable call company and see which one you like best and try out making different calls with them. And Dixie Deer class is coming up. That's another great place to go around and buy a variety of calls from a variety of people and see what sounds they're making and see what sounds best to you. I carry 3 or 4 mouth calls with me when I go hunting, and each one makes a slightly different sound. And oftentimes I'll even carry 2 in my mouth at one time, one on each side of the cheek, and switch them back and forth when I'm calling and when I'm trying to close that final distance with those birds.
And do keep it in the side of your mouth when you're climbing ridges. I tend to hunt in the mountains rather than on flat land. You start breathing a little bit. You don't want that right into place unless you're working a bird, because you don't want to swallow it and end up with that situation. So yeah, just be careful.
There are some significant pros and cons to having the mouth call in.
Yes.
A big pro, you're not using your hands. So when you're sitting or kneeling against the tree or in your gobbler chair and you have your gun on your shoulder waiting for that bird to come in, you don't have to take your hands off and work a pot call or work a gobbler tube or even a wing bone. You can go no hand.
Because I'd say I get maybe 2 seasons out of a call, and then it starts the tape wears off. So you've got to replace them, unlike the pot call or the box call or some of the other calls. But yes, hands-free, variety of calls, and obviously, as we showed earlier, using 2 calls at one time makes it much easier.
Yeah. Deet's a little more extreme than I am on caring for his calls. This call I have in my mouth, I took it out of my bag this morning and I haven't touched it since last hunting season when I put it in my bag, and it ran just fine on the way here. So there's some wins and losses.
You'll find your own style. That's what you go with. Okay, folks, we're going to get into our last segment here, and that's going to be advanced calling techniques. We also, in our webinars, hopefully, yes, you're watching that right now, perhaps, we'll be talking about advanced tactics, but this is advanced calling. So we're going to share 3. I'm going to start out with cutting. I'll start with a diaphragm. I do like to cut with a diaphragm, but I'll probably pick up a box and a slate as well, just real quick to give you examples. Cutting with a diaphragm, it's real fast, not yelps, but clucks, and it's an excited hen. She's excited in coming into the gobbler, and by and large, other than the start out with the yelp or maybe a purr or a tree call, I like the cut. So if I find that bird is fired up and he's gobbling, I will call too much, too loud. But remember too, once that bird gets to a position where you can see him and he can see you, do not make any calls, because then immediately that bird will pick you out, and since you will not be a turkey, he'll be gone. Cutting. Usually I'll start out with maybe a cluck, couple yelps, and then I'll go into a cut. And you don't have to make, it's okay to come back to a purr, it's okay to come back to a cluck, and even if you end on a sour note, like, just cover it up, keep going. That's an example. Because if you stop, that can be a bad thing. Say on a box call, cutting. On a slate. And again, remember, sounding like 2 birds, diaphragm, and a pot or a box. That is cutting.
So up next would be the fly down cackle, and the fly down cackle is a sequence of sounds that a hen will often make when she's flying down from the roost in the morning. And it's a sequence that I use when a gobbler's already gobbled a couple times on the roost, and I want him to think, hey, come on over here to the hen that's over here, not the hens that are over there. So I usually started off with a few light hen yelps, kind of like Deep did, and then progress into getting louder. And you can add different things into it. Some people have wings with them to simulate the fly down. Some people take their hat off and beat it against their leg. People do a wide variety of things to add sounds to this call. But for me, I try to keep it simple, and I use something like this. And I tend to start high and then kind of coast off like she's flying down out of the tree, getting ready to hit the ground. And usually as she's hitting the ground, she turns off that cackle and starts yelping afterwards. Do you do anything different?
Same thing, usually use my hat, or sometimes a wing. A turkey wing works nice if you save that from a previous gobbler. But yeah, basically the same thing.
Okay. The next call that we cover would be gobbles. So Dee kind of talked about the gobbler shaker earlier. I tend to gobble with my diaphragm. I shake my head, it gets a different sound. But again, you usually sparingly. I don't typically use it on public land, but oftentimes my favorite time to use it is when I know there's multiple gobblers together that are grouped up. I've either seen them in the field somewhere, or I've heard them gobbling together, and then I want to imitate a lone gobbler, maybe even with a hen, and try to encourage one of them to come over and investigate and be dominant over top of me. So for me, a gobble sounds something like this. And Dee's just demonstrated on the gobble tube, and there's a couple different ways you can work that.
Yep, this can either be used this way, by hand, by using the plunger by hand, or just shaking it. But again, be careful using the gobble call, because you could attract another hunter, and many won't even use it if they're hunting public land, unless they're in a really isolated area.
Yep. So just like you can hear that gobble, and you want that gobbler to hear that gobble, so can other hunters in the area.
The spit and drum is probably not used by a lot of hunters. There are calls that are made to spit and drum, but although I bought them, I have yet to make them work. It's just, you've got to like say things like chukka, 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 and my mouth just don't want to do it. That's why I don't purr well with a diaphragm. And in fact, when we were young and you know, people could flutter their tongue. I can't do that, and that makes good purrs. But for the spit and drum, that is a call that a gobbler makes when he goes from just being, all his feathers are down, he'll go into that strut. He's getting ready to display for that hen, and he'll basically puff up and he'll go. And if that bird's close, you'll hear that. And if that bird's close, don't move. If you hear that sound, that means he's close. So again, he'll go from that just walking, he'll all of a sudden bring that, you'll start seeing the wings and the tail going up. And if you can do that with your face mask on, so you're not moving your mouth, you just never know.
That's one of my favorite sounds in the woods to hear, because that means that bird's close, and usually if I haven't seen him already, I'm going to see him very shortly.
And then you're doing this. So be careful, don't move.
I'm usually doing this,
Yes.
clicking the safety off. So up next would be the kiki. The kiki is like a whistling type call that you often hear hens making in the fall when they're together, or when a large group of hens are together. And to me, it's one of those kind of locator calls or keep in touch calls that they tend to make to let each other know where they are as they're feeding throughout the day. Let's hear the kiki.
Yep, and this can be a bird that's, say, maybe a non-dominant gobbler, because there's a dominant gobbler and then there's lesser gobblers, often referred to as satellites or subordinates. He may be looking for a buddy. Maybe his buddy was harvested, or he's by himself. That fall call was a, hey, I'm over here, you know, let's get together kind of thing. Is it commonly used in the spring? No, but it can be the difference when a turkey's not responding to a yelp or a gobble. Not my best. Whistle followed by yelps. Again, it's just another trick in the bag of tricks. Okay, gobbler yelping. Something from my many years of the fine collection of now obsolete VHS videos and DVDs. One hunter from Missouri used to often use gobble yelping. Why use gobble yelping? You want to sound like a hen in the spring. It's the mating season. But that is another thing that challenges the dominance of another male. And especially if the area that you're hunting in, for example, I typically start in a northern state, in the mountains where it's much colder, and although the photo period is what brings turkeys into breeding, you could be having a late spring. When you have a late spring, again, even though the amount of sunlight is what brings them in to breeding, they can get in almost like a fall mood. And gobblers will gobble yelp. And using a gobble yelp can challenge that dominance, or even say, hey, I'm another, I'm looking for a buddy. Because gobblers hang together in the fall and late winter. So the difference is, and I'll use this, the slate, it's probably the easiest to do, is a regular hen yelp is a faster cadence. Regular hen yelp. Gobbler yelp is more like this. Slow it down, not fast. And they'll even cluck sometimes in that. That's a gobbler yelp.
I tend to hear the gobbler yelp when it's a group of jakes together that can't quite gobble or haven't developed their gobble all the way, and they tend to yelp back and forth to other gobblers that are gobbling, or even to hens that are calling. That's when I tend to hear that gobble yelp most often.
Okay, folks, the last call we're going to use is not a call that you would use in turkey hunting. It is an alarm call that the turkeys use. And in fact, if you hear this sound, it means if you don't have a shot at that bird, if that bird is out of range, if that bird is not seen, you can pretty much guarantee you won't get a shot, and it is called the putt. And we just want you to know what it is so you can recognize it. And we don't use a box call or a slate call or a diaphragm. You probably could use a diaphragm, but I can just usually make the call with my loud, annoying voice. And it basically goes like this. And if you hear that sound, that is the worst sound. It is so disheartening because it means that turkey saw something it didn't like, and before you know it, him and the others are doing it, and they're going the other way.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, last season I had a hen doing that alarm call, and I started calling over top of her. She was separate from the gobblers. She, of course, ran off. Those gobblers kept coming on in. So that doesn't always mean that putt, doesn't always mean the bird you're chasing is the one that saw you, but you definitely don't want to hear that sound in the woods. That's not what we're going for.
Absolutely, good point.
So I guess the final few things to wrap up here. You don't have to be perfect to call a turkey in. You don't have to be an expert to call a turkey in. You can do it with a few simple calls. You can get at Walmart, you can get at Amazon, or you can go extravagant and buy handmade custom calls. But I encourage you to practice your calls before season, but don't practice them in the woods. You're educating birds for later on in the season when you don't need that education.
Yes, and I will say with the mouth diaphragm, the first time I picked it up, I was like, I'm never going to get this. And once you do that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you don't want to do it around family members because it will drive them nuts. So a good way to do it at that time, when I first started doing it, was probably in the late 80s, is I would go out. There was a park near where I lived, and at night after work, I'd go for walks and I'd keep trying it. Well, finally, when I got them sounds, and if you do practice it in a way, like I said, the high note, low note, you will eventually pick it up. It may take some time, but even if you don't, the box, the slate, the push-pull, those calls work. And again, getting to the point of calling, you're going to love to call, you're going to call too much. Use calling sparingly. Again, if you're convinced that bird sounds like he's coming closer and he's responding, let him find you. You don't need to keep calling, because keep in mind that every time you do call, that bird's typically, even if you can't see him, he'll go into that strut, he'll do the spit and drum. He's expecting that hen to show up. So let him seek you out.
Patience has killed more turkeys than calling ever has.
Exactly.
A little tip.
Exactly. Good luck this season. Be ethical, be safe, and pass it on.
It's a good ending, Dee.
Okay, folks, yeah, I ran a little long with the video, but hey, we try to give you the best we got and then more. Go to the NWTF website. you can practice the sounds. You can pull up the calls there, recordings of live calls, and you can test them against yourself. And there's so many videos and stuff on the World Wide Web, so take advantage of it. Time for Q&A now. And of course, you may be already starting to write. I'll be looking up there in a second here to see what it is. Maybe not right now, but first, a few reminders. The webinar link, because a lot of people don't come in early on. The webinar links are distributed following registration close, post 2 p.m. daily. So in other words, there's a couple people emailed me last night. Oh, where's the link? Where's the link? Well, we don't put it on the, we don't put it in the Go Outdoors, because then we could potentially overbook, which wouldn't happen, but I try to give it to you as close to the time. Recordings distributed to registrants in less than or equal to 2 weeks and maybe longer. They get processed by other folks within our division. It's out of my control. So is what it is. Tonight's link is not the recording. Once you attend the live event, that's gone. You must register for all the webinars you wish to view. And as a general rule, what I'll do is I'll wait till I get the recordings, and then I'll send them en masse to everybody that is in the portal. So in other words, for every night, everybody's in the portal, they will get the link along with, and I'll move that forward, a survey, a post-webinar survey. And so I'll provide that with the recording. And as it says there, I don't always strut right to your call, but when I do, it's 30 minutes after you left. So keep the patience. Very important. And we'll talk more tomorrow night about strategies and the need for being patient. So we already have a couple questions. Annoying Deet James is the narrator. I'm going to pull them up. And of course, I have my panelists to assist. Can you explain more about how and when owl and crow calls help with scouting and with hunting? John Henry.
So owl and crow calls, they're excuse me, I'm sorry. They are shot gobbles. And so when you hear a gobble, gobblers typically call a bunch on the roost. So when they're in the tree and they fly down, and depending upon the status of breeding among the hens, he may be calling a bunch or he may not be. And so once he quits calling and you want to figure out where he is, you can use those calls, a crow call or a turkey or a owl call or a coyote howler or woodpecker call, whatever. You can use those calls to get that gobbler to gobble without you having to use a hen call. And so if you know where he is, then that means you have a big piece of the puzzle that allows you to try to set up inside his bubble. And I like to set up, 150, 200 yards away if I can, and without him seeing me. And then hopefully he'll be responsive to the first time I call. And so that's why you use owl calls or crow calls or hawk calls. Is to try to get them to gobble. And so you can figure out where he is without letting him know where you are.
Right. And just as the other hunter, I'll just add something else brief. As John Henry pointed out, when you want to find out where he is, if you are moving, trying to move on that bird, and if you're using turkey calls, at any time that turkey could break and head towards you when you are not properly set up. So the idea is use those locators to figure out where he is, where he wants to go. And only when you are set up and ready to call him do you use the actual turkey calls. Yeah. If you don't hear a turkey first thing in the morning, is it worth it to stay there and call, or should I move to a new spot and try a locator call? John Henry.
If I have a bunch of land, then yes, it is, to me, it's worthwhile to move and try to get on a bird that's being vocal. If you're restricted in size of the property, so say like you only got like 30 or 40 acres, you can hear everything. But turkeys are there. Sometimes they just don't gobble. I think Hannah showed it last night, the goblin morphology. Some days are just on fire and some days they're just not. And some days they're there and some days they're not. They have, they're not always in the same spot. So that's part of part of learning how to turkey hunt, I think, is making those decisions.
And believe me, more often than not, I do get cold and sometimes snow and will not hear anything at all. But in my style of hunting that you'll hear about tomorrow night, cut and run, is I'll move and call and move and call and move and call until I strike a bird. But I move, stop, and call. Move, stop, and call. Move, stop, and call. And wherever I stop, I'm already looking for a tree. I won't stop until I see a tree close by or something that I can set up by, because that way, then if you do strike a bird close, you can immediately set up rather than get caught out in the open and you get picked out. So yeah, if you don't hear anything in the morning, you may later, just like John Henry pointed out. And somebody and also said, thanks for the info, guys. Hey, that's what we're here about. This stuff is a big deal to us. How far would you want to move when changing spots, John Henry?
Again, it depends on just the lay of the land. You know, in the mountains, you may just have to move a couple hundred, you know, maybe 100 yards or 200 yards, and you'll be in a different holler over the ridge and talking or hearing different things. At the coast, you may have to walk 400 or 500 yards to be hearing different areas, or for that bird to be hearing you. I don't call all the way along that route. I'm usually, like Deet said, you know, you call, you listen. If you don't hear anything, you move some distance. Sometimes it's only 100 yards, and sometimes it's 400 or 500 yards. It just depends on what the cover looks like and how many birds are around, or my previous experience in the area. Those things all matter.
Absolutely. One of the greatest challenges, as John Henry initially pointed out, not all birds are vocal. And more often than not, when I'm moving and calling in the ridges and in the mountains, and I've done it many times, there was a change in topography out in front of me. I'm moving and calling. All of a sudden, I get near the edge and I hear, woof, 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 woof. That means I likely had a bird coming in, but not vocal. And I scared them away. And I did that more often than not. Hence, you'll hear us say tomorrow night, patience, patience, and then some more patience. Let me pull the questions down. Someone told me to paint my Jake decoy faces white to help bring in the toms to challenge them. Any advice you can suggest about that, John Henry?
You know, an adult gobbler, he does change. His head does change as, you know, depending upon his mood. Jakes typically don't have that happen. I don't think that would make that big of a deal. I think actually it may intimidate some subordinate gobblers, maybe. Decoys are iffy. I've seen birds run to my decoys and flog them, and I've seen birds come out and look at them and then turn and walk the other way. So it's I don't have a lot to say, I guess, as far as painting that head red.
And I just leave them the way they are. For me, again, it's more about the I mean, it could work, but it's more about the silhouette of a turkey. Is it okay to call a lot while moving, or do you want to wait 15 to 20 minutes between calling, John Henry?
It's I tend to be a little more quiet, or if I'm gonna call, I tend to call, make multiple calls, and then I am quiet. So, like, you know, I'll yelp, you know, have multiple sequences of yelps, and then I will be quiet for 10 or 15 minutes. And it's all situational, and it's all dependent upon what that bird's gobbling. You definitely don't want to call and then immediately turn and walk away, because there may be like a delayed gobble where he doesn't gobble right away, or, you know, you call the first time and he hears it but he doesn't respond. You call again, then he hears it, he responds that second time. So if you didn't wait and only call one time, he, you know, you may have missed that. But it's all about situational, how much time you have, how much room you have to walk, how many other hunters are in the area, how much pressure those birds have received. All those things make a difference. I mean, if I had unlimited thousands of acres and no one else was hunting and unlimited time, I'd just be walking until I found one that was gobbling his daggum head off, because that's what you want. But that's not what you always get.
And I'll just say as a cautionary, as you say, okay to call a lot while moving. Do not call while moving. Stop, call, then move. Stop, call, then move. Because keeping in mind, when we talked about biology last night, turkeys are bipedal and so are humans. You can sound like a turkey and a turkey can sound like you. So keep that in mind. Okay, well, it looks like another question popped up. We are getting close to that time, but we'll try to entertain whatever questions you're providing. You talked about ground blinds. Is it okay to hunt turkey from a tree blind? Have you done it and had success with it, John Henry?
Tree stands, you gotta think, birds, they're gonna be able to hear where you're calling from. I think being up in the tree limits you a little bit. There are definitely people who get in tower stands or tree stands and kill birds every year. You can watch YouTube videos seeing them do it. I don't have any experience doing it. I think it would help me hear them and probably help me see them. But as far as being mobile or being able to turn around and shoot, that may be your limiting factor. So,
I would just say running, gunning with my style, that would be like deer hunting. That would just not work for me. That said, if you've got a property, or even a public area where birds are frequenting a certain area, then yeah, you could hunt them like they're deer. If they come in there daily, you could kill them that way. It's just not, say, a preferred by me, but yeah, you could do it just like sitting in a blind. And that's really the trick, as both our hunters know, both Eric and John Henry, is that if you can find out where he's going, if you know and you can discover where he's going by patterning him, all you've got to do is go be there, and you don't even need to call him. But that usually takes the lack of WORK that gets in the way of those things, and it's tough to pattern. It's tough to pattern the birds, especially large tracts of land. Okay, so since it is at that 8:30 time, I'm not seeing any questions. I want to first thank very much my panelists. We didn't have any regulations questions tonight. Maybe we'll get them tomorrow night. We didn't have any biology regulations questions. Usually we do get overlap. I'm seeing something coming up while I'm yakking. A little off topic, but is it legal to put a camera on game lands? There you go, Eric. There's one for you.
Yes, it is legal for you to run trail cameras on game lands. Just be aware, it is public property, and unfortunately, there is a risk of, somebody else stumbling upon that and stealing it, just like, putting up a lock on or leaving a climber on a tree for a couple of nights. You can absolutely do it, but, just be aware. It is possible that it could get stolen.
And somebody said, thank you. You're very welcome. So, yeah, we're going to wrap it up. If no other ones pop up, I want to thank my panelists again, Hannah, Eric, and John Henry. Tomorrow night will be the conclusion, which will be hunting techniques and strategies. We hope you join us. Pull somebody else in too. Make sure you registered if you didn't. Thank you. Have a great night. Hope to see you tomorrow night for the final. And with that, I'm going to close. Thank you, folks, for being my panelists tonight. And thank you, students, for being here. We hope you learned something. And I will say finally that turkey hunting is so very exciting and almost polar compared to deer. Two totally different seasons. For the most part, two totally different techniques, but they mesh one another so excitingly perfect. And the gobble of a wild turkey is a symphony unwritten. Have a great night, folks. Hope to see you tomorrow night, and I will stop the share. Thank you, panelists. Have a good night.